Hello and welcome back to the channel. I thought I'd share this video and maybe do some more repair and upgrade type videos, just because a lot of the videos that I watch on YouTube, which I spend a considerable amount of my time in front of the TV watching, is watching other people work, especially repair type videos. I really love Ted Woodford, even the Guitologist sometimes, and Uncle Doug, of course, is a great one. And D-Lab, Terry Dayton at D-Lab is also really great. Just a lot of videos that I like where skilled repairmen and technicians are doing their craft. So, you know, I spent a lot of time in electronic support in my earlier career, doing component level repair on monitors and early equipment, I guess you'd call it, in the 90s. But you know, I'd solder and desolder all day long, so I feel like I'm a pretty good technician and troubleshooter, except that you have to take all the screws out before you can take that back plate off. But let's go through this together. This is the EG500 Greco Les Paul from Japan that I showcased not long ago. And I had dropped a replacement pickup, just a nondescript. The only reason I put that pickup in there, and it didn't sound bad. It was fair. It was a good pickup. I mean, but it was probably some Chinese thing. And it had a chrome cover, so I thought it matched the guitar okay at the time. And so I decided to go ahead and get a Dimarzio Super Distortion for this thing. I pulled it off of Reverb for a pretty fair price. I really like the Super Distortion. There's a lot of great competition in pickups these days, but when I was a youngster, back in the old days, there was the Seymour Duncan SH5, I guess it was, and the JB came along, and there was the Dimarzio Super Distortion. And so many of my favorite artists have used that Dimarzio. And I remember the first guitar I had, it was an SG way back when I was trying to collect SGs after I got my first SG. This was I was probably 18 years old or so. And that thing just screamed, you know, when I plugged that in compared to other guitars with humbuckers. That thing really took it over the top. I was like, oh, that does make a big difference. So I've used Seymour Duncans in my guitars. In Blackwater, you know, my buddy and the creator of Blackwater, Shason, he was always a believer of the SH and the JB. And his guitar tone was great, going through a Marshall straight up. But at that time, I had some amps that were out of control. And here I'm just working on getting my soldering iron heated up and figuring out the best way to remove this old pickup. But yeah, I had a Metaltronics amplifier designed by Lee Jackson, and it had 2 volumes, off and full blast. I swear to God, I put that thing on 1.5, and it was just, it'll take your damn head off. And so feedback was a problem in that band for me with that rig. So I gravitated towards the EMG active pickups, and I thought they sounded great. Frankly, for metal and for feedback control, I didn't think they could be beat. And I went down that path for a long time until I changed my cabinet and amp setup. I should have kept that Metaltronics, but alas, it is gone. So here I'm just getting the wires out of the way, trying not to melt the wires adjacent to the ones that I'm trying to work on here, and get that thing removed that soldering iron is a Weller, but it's an older model. I'm not sure offhand what the wattage is. I got a kind of a medium-sized tip on that thing, but getting the grounding on the back of the pots to get melted enough to pull that off can be a challenge, and putting them back on. So I find that adding a fresh amount of new solder helps get that continuum. And there you go. After I put a blob of solder on the iron and stuck it on there, the ground came out okay. So there's the pickup on the left there. It's a cream and black, which I thought was really cool, and I thought ended up looking really good on this guitar. Now I elected to keep the strings on. As you can see, in this case, I just kind of took the top three, loosened them up, and pushed them over to the side, took the bridge off, and set them to the side of the plastics there around the posts of the ABR bridge, which that's another bonus of these era of Grecos. They have the ABR style. The screw goes right into the wood there. So I have to reuse the plastic ring on the old pickup, which I'm not sure if that actually matches the plastics on this thing. I get a piece of foam, which I'm also using to protect the guitar from my workbench here in the garage. I got the fan on in the corner. It was hot last night. And so going through the tedium of removing the screws, and you'll notice I keep checking the angle, because the pickup ring has an angle that sets on the Les Paul, so it'll set more level with the strings. So there's a natural taper that goes on with the plastics, and I keep checking. I don't know why I haven't figured out by now that it is smaller to larger from the neck to the bridge, and also the size and the guidance, the orientation of the wire on the pickup, what corner the wire comes from. You see too that that Dimarzio on the left has a relatively short lead on it, so I keep it to the bottom right as you're holding the guitar. So I guess from this position, it's in the bottom left-hand side when I shove the wires in there. And I don't know, I think the black bobbin is typically going to be installed towards the rear, towards the bridge anyway. That's how it ended up, so I don't know. You can flip those around. It's not going to hurt anything if you decide you want the cream in the back or whatever. But yeah, you got it right, Todd. But let's see if I have to check again. Now the springs that came, this could be a real tedious task too. Putting the pickup into the ring. The Dimarzio, this particular Dimarzio, had a flathead screw. And that's such a pain in the ass. Why did they do that? But the other one had a Phillips, and the springs that came with the Dimarzio, anyway, I don't know if they're stock or not since I got it used, are really long and stiff. And really difficult to get the screw started onto the pickup threads, the metal pickup threads, because you got to smash it in there while you're trying to hold it steady and trying to get a flat blade screwdriver onto that damn screw head. So sorry that I'm a little out of camera here on these shots. This is the first time I've been filming from my workbench, so excuse the camera angles and the focus and things. It's a best effort type of thing here to capture this. So I used the shorter springs that came with that other pickup, that Chinese, I believe it's a Chinese pickup, whatever, the nondescript pickup, and I just pulled them out a little bit. I stretched them out a little bit to make them a little more, give them a little more tension against the pickup. And still, it's a bit of a struggle here. Because without them, if there's not enough tension on the pickup with the spring, ring, it'll wobble around in there, and it might vibrate and make undesirable noises. Actually, my Greco, the black superpower, has that problem, and I really should have remedied that, but I'll do that on the next string change now, because it's quite a different setup there. Anyway, this is a tedious task, and you can see even then when I get it started, the flat blade, which I could have used a wider one, but the smallest one I had handy besides this shop screwdriver, which incidentally I did get from my first day at work when I was hired on to do the electronic tech work for monitors and such. It's one of those novelty screwdrivers with a magnet on the end where you can pull it out, and it can either be a Phillips or a flat blade. So good to know it's still in service. But here I am on the other side trying to get that guy started, and maybe chime in the comments if you've got a more clever way to keep that spring tensioned up so it's not such a pain in the ass to get it lined up with the metal threads of the actual pickup metal inserts, whatever, where they go to. And that's another thing too. I just get it to where it's about even with the pickup ring. But I don't show this at the end of the video, but I adjust the pickup once I have it installed on the guitar with the strings tuned up. I like personally around 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch clearance from the string to the pickup when the string is depressed towards the end of the frets, like 23 or 24, and see where the string is in relation to the pickup. You don't want your strings touching the pickup pole pieces and making undesirable noises. You see here, I'm trying to show the orientation right now, which is that the red wire there is hot and the green is tied to the ground wire, the bare wire from the pickup, and the black and the white wire are connected together and tied off, insulated off. I note later that there's a little bit of bare wire showing on that. But yeah, pickup height in relation to the strings makes a significant difference. I think I covered this on another video, but it's worth experimenting with. And check out the distance if you haven't on your guitars. If you got a guitar that kind of has a weak output and you have the space, you might consider raising the pickup height up with those two adjustment screws and see what a difference it makes, because it really can improve your tone. And maybe if it's too aggressive, you want to take it down a little bit. You can go both ways, as they say. So here I am just kind of cleaning up the solder on the other wires there and getting it prepared to put into the guitar and get it installed. The space is kind of tight on the cavity, and I gotta stick my hands in to get the right angle without touching the other wires and stuff. But I'll kind of walk you through what I did there. Now the ground solder on the back of the volume potentiometer is not all my doing. It's pretty sloppy and it's a big glob. So don't be too harsh with your criticisms. I'm just working with what's already there. It's perfectly fine, but it just doesn't look like a clean factory job or anything like that either. So it's doing its job. It's a big blob of solder on the back of the pot, and that's what's needed. Now this is a little crowded when I try to get the lead into the cavity, so it took me an attempt or two here, and I ended up kind of pushing the other braided wires that are coming from the neck pickup and the three-way switch to get it in there. on a few occasions, I've had to feed something in, a stiffer wire, like some bale wire or something, from the control cavity, pickup cavity, control cavity into the pickup cavity, and I either duct tape or put a little J hook on there and pull it through. That technique works fine. But I do end up getting this out of being stubborn and not wanting to make that step on this attempt, I believe, to get it in there. And you can see I'm kind of feeling my way in now. I can tell that it's cleared the other wires and is into the cavity, and kind of making sure that I don't have too much slack underneath the pickup there, and getting it around those damn strings so I can get a couple screws in. Now, just put 2 screws in case you need to pull it out again for some reason. On many occasions, I've just kind of held it with my hand and flipped it over, but that can lead to problems like scratches on the. Obviously, this guitar is not a pristine example, so I'm not too worried about scratches and things, or the pickup can fall out when you're trying to flip it back over after getting the wires. So I just install 2 screws into the pickup ring here to keep it in place. I don't put all 4 of them in case I need to take it out afterwards for some issue. So here's the Dimarzio wiring diagram, and you can see what I was talking about. The green and the bare wire are tied together at the volume pot and grounded on the back there, where the red is typically set up as the hot and going into that far lug on the volume pot. And what we're doing here is reversing those, so it'll be out of phase. I've talked before about how I prefer to have the out of phase option when in the middle position on the pickup selector, and if I have a choice and if I'm working on something, I'll orient it in that way. And this is the electronic method of doing that, reversing the green and the red. Now, I have a previous video where I'm doing it with, I believe, a Seymour Duncan pickup, and they have a different coloring code for their pickup wires. So do be mindful of that. Both Seymour Duncan and Dimarzio have really good wiring diagrams on their site, which is where I pulled that from. So be mindful of that, and they have really good examples of hooking it up into a Strat or a Les Paul 3 pickup configuration, 1 pickup, 1 with a single coil, whatever. They've got a really good diagram. We didn't get those in the old days. What you did get, though, was a piece of paper with your pickup that had a diagram in it, so that was nice, and I used to save those. I still have at least one of those from one of the pickups that I purchased a long time ago. So now I'm working on getting that green wire into the far lug on that pot, and might have pulled the focus up a little more on that so you could see, but I'm just trying to get that into the lug hole with that other wire going to the tone circuit. So that's what's happening here, and I'll get a blob of solder on that. And normally I'll have a J hook on both of those, but in this case I just got them oriented so they would sit in there properly, and put a blob of solder on there. Make sure that when you do that the whole eyelet, that circle that you're putting the wires into, is covered with a good bead of solder. And you want to hold the solder in place, the soldering iron in place, long enough that it will melt the solder sufficiently and to a temperature that it will adhere. Excuse me. Otherwise, you're going to have a cold solder joint, and that can be bad from a conductivity standpoint. So, and that's what I'm doing here. I've only got part of the eyelet hole covered in solder, so I drop another piece on there Or maybe I already did that and I lost track of time. Yeah, because I'm working on the ground lug here. Now this can also be tricky. As I mentioned before, it takes a lot of heat to get that piece of solder on that back of the pot, which acts as a, basically it acts as a heat conductor. What's the word I'm looking for here? A heat sink. It's basically acts as a heat sink because you got to get that whole piece of metal heated up enough. And if I have learned the hard way, if you get that too hot, you can ruin the potentiometer. The potentiometer can get damaged from the heat applied there. So I'm just using a soldering instrument here to try to hold it down. And that also acts as a heat sink in some ways. So I think I abandoned this and just end up using the pliers to hold it in place while I get a blob of solder on there. There's already a pretty good amount on the wire itself. And so, yeah, this is the great angle I was talking about where I'm getting that heated up. But you just got to have a good soldering iron and keep it on there long enough that it will melt the solder that you're working with as well as the solder underneath, so it makes a good bond. And that's the whole trick of good soldering is the amount that you hold it. It's not too much and it's not too little to get it good conductive and a good physical and solder connection. So here the black and white wires, I noticed there's a bit of bare wire showing underneath that heatsink, and I tried to kind of push it down, but it didn't work. I don't think it's going to touch anything the way that it's set, but as a precaution, I cut a piece of electrical tape and secure it to the exterior wire of the pickup. Now, I used to just tear off the black tape with my hand and pressure, just tear it off, but that weakens the black tape and it also kind of messes with the adhesive. So over the last many years, I've been cutting the black tape. So good pro tip, lesson learned, passing on. And that's pretty much it. It worked well. Thanks for coming by. Appreciate it and take care.